Zeus, what he was really like. Zeus. The name itself carries weight. For the ancient Greeks, he was not simply another god in a long list of divine beings. He was the god, the king of Olympus, the ruler of gods and men, the wielder of thunder and lightning. But when we move slowly, very slowly, through the old stories, what emerges is not a clean portrait of perfection, but a rather uneven and contradictory character. Zeus, you see, was not flawless. He was not endlessly wise nor endlessly kind. He was powerful, yes. He was supreme, yes. But he was also deeply human in his behavior, jealous, impulsive, inconsistent, and often distracted by his own desires. And in this way, he was not so much the god above all men, but the god who reflected what men themselves were like, only enlarged to cosmic scale. Now, to begin with, let us remember where Zeus comes from. He is the child of the Titans Kronos and Rhea. Kronos, afraid that his own children would overthrow him, as he himself had overthrown his father Uranus, decided upon the simplest of strategies. He swallowed them, one by one, whole, without chewing. He swallowed Hestia. He swallowed Demeter. He swallowed Hera. He swallowed Hades. He swallowed Poseidon. 5 children gone into his stomach. And when Zeus was born, Rhea, his mother, finally acted. She hid the infant in a cave on the island of Crete, handing her husband a stone wrapped in cloth instead. Kronos swallowed it without noticing. And so Zeus grew up in hiding, raised by nymphs, nourished by the milk of the goat Amalthea, his cries drowned out by the clashing of shields from the Curetes, warriors who danced and struck their weapons together so that Kronos would not hear the child's wails. Already you can see that the story of Zeus's childhood is not the tale of a distant, untouchable god. It is the story of a vulnerable infant, smuggled away, hidden, protected. When Zeus came of age, he tricked Kronos into regurgitating his siblings. Some versions say he gave him a potion, prepared by Metis, goddess of cunning. Others say it was by sheer force. Either way, the swallowed gods came out again, fully grown and ready for battle. And so began the Great War, the Titanomachy, where Zeus and his siblings fought against Kronos and the Titans for 10 long years. 10 years of battle until at last Zeus and his allies triumphed. The Titans were cast into Tartarus, the deep abyss beneath the earth, guarded by the monstrous Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed giants. And thus Zeus took his place as ruler. He drew lots with his brothers, Poseidon taking the sea, Hades the underworld, and Zeus the sky, with authority over all. This is the beginning of his kingship. But what is most striking when we consider Zeus slowly, very slowly, without rushing, is how little he behaves like the ideal king. Let us linger first on Zeus as ruler of justice. He is often called Zeus Xenios, the protector of guests, of hospitality. If a stranger came to your home, you were expected to treat them well, for they might be watched by Zeus himself. He was also Zeus Horkios, guardian of oaths, and Zeus Augoroios, keeper of the marketplace, where promises and trades were made. In these aspects, Zeus is the god of order, of fairness, of society functioning properly. The Greeks depended on him to watch over their agreements, to ensure the customs of hospitality were kept, to punish those who broke sacred promises. But at the very same time, Zeus was the greatest breaker of promises himself. He swore oaths and bent them. He seduced mortal women, swearing secrecy, swearing loyalty, only to vanish again. He was the defender of marriage in name, and yet the single greatest violator of it in practice. His own wife, Hera, goddess of marriage, spent much of her mythological existence chasing after the endless trail of affairs that Zeus left behind. And here, slowly, one begins to understand. Zeus was not a model of virtue. He was a model of power. Power without consistent morality. Power that bends rules for itself while enforcing them for others. To the Greeks, this was not hypocrisy. It was reality. The king can punish theft, even while stealing. The king can punish adultery, even while committing it. The king is above the laws he enforces. Zeus embodied that truth. Now let us move to his many affairs. There are so many that they become almost tedious to list, but tedious is perhaps the right pace for tonight. There was Io, a mortal priestess, whom Zeus pursued. To hide her from Hera, he turned her into a cow. Hera, suspicious, demanded the cow as a gift and placed her under the watch of Argus, a giant with 100 eyes. Zeus then sent Hermes to kill Argus, freeing Io, though she wandered the earth in cow form for years. There was Europa, whom Zeus abducted by transforming himself into a bull. She climbed onto his back, and he swam across the sea, taking her to Crete, where she bore him children, including Minos, future king of Crete. There was Leda, whom he approached in the form of a swan, and Danae, whom he visited as a shower of golden rain, leading to the birth of Perseus. There was Semele, whom he approached in secret, and who was destroyed when she demanded to see him in his full divine form, consumed by lightning. From her, however, came Dionysus, god of wine and ecstasy. And on and on and on. Mortal women, nymphs, even goddesses. Zeus never stopped. Hera's jealousy was unfounded, but Zeus, as king of the gods, could not be restrained. Now, in addition to his many children by many mothers, Zeus was also the father of several of the most important gods and heroes. Athena, born from his head after he swallowed Metis, Apollo and Artemis by Leto, Hermes by Maia, Persephone by Demeter in some traditions, Hercules by the mortal Alcmene, Helen of Troy in some accounts by Leda. To list them all is not only tedious, but endless. Almost every lineage of gods and heroes in Greek myth could be traced back to Zeus if one looked long enough. But again, this is not the story of a noble and restrained king. This is the story of a restless and unstoppable figure, forever hungry for more. And yet for all this, Zeus was also a god of stability. He was called Zeus Soter, Zeus the Savior, Zeus the Preserver. He watched over cities. His temples crowned the Acropolis in many towns. His altars stood at marketplaces, at crossroads, even on mountain peaks. Sacrifices of bulls were offered to him, the greatest and most sacred of offerings. And so, while he was feared for his tempers, his storms, his punishments, he was also trusted as the one who ultimately kept order in a dangerous world. One must also not forget Zeus's symbols, for they tell us something of his nature. The thunderbolt, forged for him by the Cyclopes during the Titanomachy, the ultimate weapon of divine authority. The eagle, bird of the sky, sharp-eyed, powerful, soaring higher than all others. The oak tree, sacred to Zeus at Dodona, where priests listened to the rustling of leaves to hear his will. These symbols are not random. They all reflect strength, height, and the natural supremacy of Zeus as sky god. But what was he really like? If we pause again and consider the pattern, his justice, his power, his unfaithfulness, his protection, his destruction, we see that Zeus was not consistent. He was not pure. He was not simply good or simply bad. He was, above all, complicated. He was the sky itself, sometimes clear, sometimes stormy, sometimes calm, sometimes violent, a god of dualities, a god of contradictions. To the Greeks, that was precisely the point. Their gods were not ideals. They were not perfect beings to imitate. They were larger versions of themselves, human traits magnified. Zeus was powerful but flawed. He was supreme but not moral. He was reliable but unpredictable. In other words, Zeus was real, not in the sense of existing physically, but real in the sense of reflecting the human world. And so when we ask what Zeus was really like, the answer is not simple. He was the protector of order. Hera, what she was really like. Hera. The name itself is heavy, regal, and familiar. She is often remembered simply as the wife of Zeus, the goddess of marriage, the queen of the Olympian gods. But when we move slowly, when we take the time to linger on the stories, the details, the contradictions, and the endless repetitions of her myth, we see that Hera is far more complex, far more human in her traits than many realize. She is not merely the jealous wife of a wandering husband. She is a goddess of power, persistence, dignity, and wrath. To begin, let us recall her origins. Hera is the daughter of Kronos and Rhea, sister to Zeus, Poseidon, Hestia, Demeter, and Hades. Like her brothers and sisters, she was swallowed by Cronus at birth and regurgitated later when Zeus forced his father to disgorge his children. Thus, from the very beginning, Hera's life was entwined with struggle, with survival, with the drama of divine politics. When Zeus ascended to the kingship of Olympus, he took Hera as his wife, and this union is often portrayed simply as a story of jealousy and marital conflict. But if we slow down, if we examine it carefully, we see layers of meaning. Hera is not merely the victim of Zeus's endless affairs, she is also a queen who asserts her authority wherever she can, who punishes those who defy her, who acts according to her own sense of justice and dignity. She is, in many ways, the moral counterbalance to Zeus's impulsive and often reckless power. Hera's domain is marriage, but this does not mean that she is an idealized, perfect wife. On the contrary, her mythology is full of instances where she pursues vengeance. And yet, in these stories, we begin to perceive a pattern. Her wrath is often aimed not only at mortal women who attract Zeus's attention, but also at heroes, gods, and mortals who act in ways that violate the natural or divine order. She is not capricious without reason. Her jealousy is tied to her understanding of power, hierarchy, and fidelity. Let us linger, very slowly, on some of these tales, because they are instructive, repetitive, and very long. First, Io. Io was a mortal woman, a priestess of Hera, whom Zeus desired. To hide her from his wife, Zeus transformed her into a white cow. Hera, however, suspected the truth and demanded that the cow be given to her as a gift. She set the 100-eyed Argus to watch Io, and Zeus, unable to leave the situation unresolved, sent Hermes to lull Argus to sleep and slay him, freeing Io. And yet Hera's vigilance and suspicion remained clear. The story is a tale not merely of jealousy, but of divine watchfulness, persistence, and the unrelenting memory of perceived wrongs. Then there is Callisto, a nymph, a follower of Artemis. Zeus seduced her, and she bore his child, Arcas. Hera, in her anger, transformed Callisto into a bear. Later, she ensured that mother and son were placed in the sky as constellations, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. This act, repeated in many variations, demonstrates the duality of Hera's nature. She punishes, yes, but she also immortalizes. She is vindictive, but in ways that endure. And then consider the many tales in which Hera attempts to destroy Heracles. Heracles, son of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene, becomes the target of Hera's wrath from birth. She sends snakes into his crib. She torments him throughout his labors. She interferes in his life whenever she can. And yet, it is worth noting, slowly, that Heracles' triumphs, though assisted by other gods or his own ingenuity, are made all the more remarkable because of the persistence of Hera's challenges. Without her obstacles, perhaps he would never have become the hero he is remembered as. Hera's power is not confined to vengeance. She is also the goddess of queenship, of authority, of lawful order within marriage and family. She presides over rites of matrimony, ensuring that the sacred bonds are honored, and punishes those who violate them. Her temples, particularly at Samos, Argos, and Olympia, were sites of great devotion, where worshippers offered sacrifices to gain her favor, to ensure fertility, to maintain domestic harmony. And even in these religious observances, we can see how her character is intertwined with human concerns. She is protective, vigilant, and exacting. Hera's personality, if one looks slowly and carefully, is full of contrasts. She is nurturing and punishing. She is revered and feared. She is a protector of marriage, yet relentless in her pursuit of justice, even when that justice seems cruel or harsh. And perhaps this is why the Greeks held her in such high esteem. They understood that life itself is full of contradictions, full of moments of love and anger, of protection and punishment, of loyalty and betrayal. Hera embodies all of these traits in her divine form. Let us consider her symbols, for they reveal more about her nature. The peacock, with its watchful eyes on its feathers, represents her vigilance and pride. The cow, sometimes associated with her, is a symbol of nurturing and motherhood. The scepter, which she holds as Queen of Olympus, is a sign of authority and power. And in these symbols, repeated in countless works of art, we see the duality of her character, beautiful and fearsome, watchful and commanding. In her stories, Hera is also often involved in political maneuvers among the gods. She negotiates alliances, influences decisions, and sometimes even manipulates the fates of mortals to suit her purposes. These acts are rarely immediate or simple. They unfold slowly, over many events, many generations of heroes and kings, until the results are fully visible. And this slow unfolding is in fact part of the point. Hera's influence is long-lasting. Her memory is enduring. Her power is subtle as well as direct. Yet, for all her strength, one must notice the inevitability of her frustrations. For every plan Hera sets in motion, Zeus's whims or mortal choices may interfere. Her schemes may be thwarted. Her anger may seem unavailing. And yet, she persists. She endures. She watches. She waits. She acts. This persistence, repeated across countless myths, is as central to her character as her jealousy or her authority. Hera is defined not only by her actions, but by her relentlessness, by the constancy with which she asserts her will. Slowly, if we repeat these ideas in our mind, a picture emerges of a goddess who is both deeply flawed and deeply admirable. She is flawed because she is jealous, angry, and vengeful. She is admirable because she is consistent, strong, and committed to the principles she embodies. She is flawed because she cannot forgive easily. She is admirable because she acts according to her values, regardless of the consequences. In conclusion, if one were to ask what Hera was really like, the answer cannot be brief. Hera was the goddess of marriage and queenship. She was jealous and vengeful. She was protective and nurturing. She was beautiful and commanding.
Poseidon, what he was really like. Poseidon. The name evokes the vastness of the sea, the crashing of waves, the trembling of the earth beneath our feet. He is not merely a god among many. He is the god of the sea, the god of earthquakes, the god of horses. And yet, when we examine him slowly, when we take our time to consider each story, each detail, each repetition, we see that Poseidon is a god of contrasts, of moods, of temperament, and of unpredictability. Poseidon, like many of the Olympians, was a child of Kronos and Rhea. He was swallowed by his father and later regurgitated, fully grown, after Zeus forced their father to release the children. From this beginning, we see a pattern. The gods emerge into a world already shaped by struggle, by survival, by conflict. Poseidon, like his siblings, enters the world ready to assert his power, ready to carve out a domain in which he will reign supreme. And Poseidon's domain is vast. The sea is infinite, boundless, mysterious, and dangerous. To the Greeks, it was the source of life, the route for travel, the unpredictable barrier between lands, and often the instrument of death. And in the same way, Poseidon embodies all of these qualities. He is powerful, life-giving, destructive, and unpredictable. He is a god whose temperament reflects the natural world, calm one moment, violent the next. Consider first his power over water. Poseidon could summon storms, raise waves, sink ships, and drown entire armies. He wielded his trident, a three-pronged spear forged in the depths of the earth to strike fear into mortals and gods alike. And yet he could also calm the waters, guide sailors safely, and provide fish and other bounty from the sea. The duality of his power, destruction and provision, is central to understanding him. To approach Poseidon is to approach the sea itself. One must respect its strength, its moods, its unpredictability. But Poseidon was not merely a god of the sea. He was also the god of earthquakes, sometimes called Earthshaker by the Greeks. When angered, he could strike the earth with his trident, causing the ground to tremble, mountains to shudder, and cities to collapse. His influence was not confined to the watery realm. It extended to the very land itself, reminding mortals that his power was omnipresent. And like the sea, his temperament was unstable, his wrath swift, his punishments sudden. Poseidon's personality, when viewed slowly and carefully, is remarkable for its impulsiveness and moodiness. He could be generous, granting sailors safe passage and providing rivers and springs. He could be cruel, punishing mortals and heroes who slighted him. And he could be jealous, quick to anger when his honor or authority was challenged. These traits make him a very human god, albeit one magnified to cosmic proportions. Let us linger, as is our custom, on some of the stories that reveal Poseidon's character. One of the earliest and most enduring is his rivalry with Athena over the patronage of the city of Athens. The citizens of Athens were to choose a patron god, and each offered a gift. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident, producing a saltwater spring, or, in some accounts, a horse. Athena offered an olive tree, symbolizing peace, prosperity, and sustenance. The citizens chose Athena, and Poseidon, angry at being denied, withdrew but continued to watch over his domain. Slowly, one sees the lesson here. Poseidon is proud, he is territorial, and he does not forget slights. His moods endure, and his memory is long. Another story reveals Poseidon's impulsive temper. When Odysseus blinded the Cyclops Polyphemus, the son of Poseidon, the god took personal offense. He punished Odysseus, prolonging his journey home from Troy for 10 long years. This act is instructive. Poseidon's anger is not abstract, it is personal, relational. He reacts not only to cosmic balance, but also to perceived offenses, slights, and challenges to his honor. His wrath is deliberate and yet often excessive, a reflection of his tempestuous nature. Poseidon is also associated with horses, which may seem peculiar at first. Some myths suggest he created the horse, or at least taught humans to tame them. Others emphasize his role in horse racing and chariot contests. And when one considers the nature of horses, wild, powerful, unpredictable, capable of great speed and occasional destruction, it becomes clear why they are associated with Poseidon. They mirror his temperament, energetic, unpredictable, and occasionally dangerous. Now let us consider his relationships, which further illustrate his character. Poseidon had many consorts, both mortal and divine, and fathered numerous children. His relationships, like Zeus's, are marked by desire, passion, and often conflict. Some of his offspring are heroes, some are monsters, some are minor deities. In all cases, his influence is pervasive. He shapes the world not only through his actions, but through his progeny. Poseidon's symbols, too, reveal much. The trident, already mentioned, is an instrument of power, fear, and authority. The horse represents strength and speed. Dolphins and fish symbolize his dominion over the waters. Each symbol reinforces the same theme. Poseidon is a god whose presence is felt everywhere, whose moods shape the natural world, whose authority is both vast and deeply personal. And yet, Poseidon is not always consistent. In some myths, he aids heroes. In others, he hinders them. He supports some cities, he punishes others. To approach Poseidon, one must accept that he is a god of contradictions. He is calm and violent, generous and wrathful, protective and destructive. This duality is what makes him so compelling and so boringly complex when one tells his stories slowly, as we are doing now. One might also reflect on his role among the Olympians. Poseidon is second only to Zeus in power, often called upon to enforce divine will, to participate in councils, to act as a mediator or enforcer. Yet he is also independent, with his own temper and preferences. He does not blindly follow Zeus, and his interventions in mortal affairs often reflect his personal judgments and moods. This independence is crucial to understanding him. He is not merely a subordinate god, he is a force of nature in his own right. In conclusion, if one were to ask what Poseidon was really like, the answer is multifaceted. He was powerful, unpredictable, and sometimes terrifying. He was generous, life-giving, and protective. He was impulsive, vengeful, and persistent. He was associated with the sea, with earthquakes, with horses, and with storms. He was a god of contrasts, reflecting both the beauty and the danger of the natural world. And so Poseidon emerges as more than just the god of the sea. He is a god of moods, of temperament, of authority, of persistence. He is, in every sense, the embodiment of the ocean itself, vast, deep, mysterious, calm and stormy, patient and tempestuous, generous and wrathful. To understand Poseidon, one must move slowly, linger over the stories, repeat the details, and contemplate the contradictions that make him, like all the Olympians, profoundly human in his divine way.
Hades, what he was really like. Hades, the name evokes shadows, silence, and the hidden depths of the earth. Unlike Zeus, ruler of the sky, or Poseidon, lord of the sea, Hades rules the realm beneath the world, the underworld, the place where mortals go when their time on earth is done. And yet, when we take the time to consider him slowly, carefully, and repetitively, we discover that Hades is not simply a dark, malevolent figure. He is complex, calm, just, relentless, and profoundly human in ways that the Greeks understood well. To begin, Hades is a child of Kronos and Rhea, swallowed by his father at birth, and later disgorged when Zeus forced Kronos to release his children. From the very beginning, then, Hades' life, like that of his siblings, was shaped by struggle, survival, and the drama of divine politics. Unlike some of his siblings, however, Hades does not concern himself with the day-to-day squabbles of Olympus. He is removed, distant, steady, and often misunderstood. Hades' domain is the underworld, a vast, shadowy, and organized place beneath the earth. It is not simply a place of punishment, it is also a place of order. The dead must go somewhere, and Hades ensures that they go to the proper place. Some mortals enter Elysium, a pleasant resting place for heroes and the virtuous. Others are consigned to the Asphodel Meadows, a neutral plane for ordinary souls. And still others, those guilty of great crimes or offenses against the gods, may find themselves in Tartarus, the deep pit of torment. Hades, in his rule, enforces this hierarchy. Slowly, we understand that he is not capricious, he is not cruel without reason. He is a god of law, order, and permanence. Yet Hades is often portrayed as stern, unyielding, and even frightening. His symbols, the scepter, the cornucopia, the helmet of invisibility, reveal different facets of his nature. The scepter represents authority, the ability to command all souls. The cornucopia, symbol of wealth and the fruits of the earth, connects him to the hidden resources beneath the soil. The helmet of invisibility, which he lends to gods and heroes, shows his power to move unseen, to strike subtly, to influence events without being noticed. Each symbol emphasizes his control, his reach, and his profound, quiet power. Hades is also a god who is rarely seen in Olympus, yet he is not absent from divine affairs. He is present when necessary,
enforcing agreements, attending councils, and asserting his will when the balance of the cosmos is at stake. Unlike Zeus, he is not impulsive. Unlike Poseidon, he is not volatile. He is deliberate, patient, and enduring. His actions are measured, and his decisions are final. Now, one of the most famous stories involving Hades is, of course, the abduction of Persephone. This tale is often told quickly in dramatic retellings, but we will linger slowly on each detail. Persephone, daughter of Demeter, was picking flowers in a meadow when Hades emerged from the earth and carried her away to the underworld. Demeter, grief-stricken, searched for her daughter tirelessly. In her sorrow, she caused the earth to become barren, leading to famine. Eventually, a compromise was reached. Persephone would spend part of the year with Hades in the underworld and part of the year with her mother on the earth. This slow cycle explains the seasons, but it also reveals Hades's nature. He is neither cruel nor capricious, just steadfast, persistent, and unyielding in the domain he governs. Hades's character is further revealed in his interactions with heroes. When Theseus and Pirithous attempted to abduct Persephone, they found themselves trapped in Tartarus, unable to escape. Hades does not act in anger in the ordinary sense. He enforces the laws of his realm, and in doing so, ensures that boundaries are respected. His justice is strict, unflinching, and unending. Despite his fearsome reputation, Hades is also generous in subtle ways. He maintains balance, ensuring that the natural order of life and death is preserved. He guards the underworld with care, ensuring that souls are not lost, that the dead are accounted for, and that mortals respect the finality of death. In this, Hades is not cruel. He is simply necessary. Slowly, we see that his seeming coldness is in fact a reflection of his commitment to order. Hades's personality is also marked by patience. Unlike Zeus or Poseidon, he rarely acts rashly or impulsively. He observes, he waits, he considers. He is deliberate in every action, and in this deliberation lies his power. He is feared not because he is unpredictable, but because he is inevitable. Mortals cannot escape death, and Hades ensures that the laws of mortality are upheld. One might also consider his relationships. Hades is married to Persephone, and their union, while born of abduction, becomes a complex story of mutual respect and balance. Persephone's presence humanizes Hades, introducing a dynamic of care, compromise, and cyclical movement. The seasons themselves serve as a reminder of Hades's influence and the delicate balance he maintains with Demeter, his counterpart on Earth. Slowly, if we repeat these observations, a picture emerges. Hades is the god of boundaries, of finality, of patience. He is not flashy, not impulsive, not openly vengeful. His power is quiet, relentless, and total. He enforces the rules that others may flout. He commands respect because of the inevitability of death, because of the permanence of his realm, because of the order he maintains. And yet, Hades is not absent from human concerns. He interacts with mortals indirectly, often through heroes or through the inevitability of death itself. He is invoked in prayers, respected in rituals, acknowledged in myths. His invisibility is part of his essence. He moves quietly, acts subtly, exerts his power without fanfare. To the Greeks, this was both frightening and reassuring. Hades is unyielding, yes, but consistent. He is strict, yes, but reliable. In conclusion, what was Hades really like? He was patient and deliberate. He was stern and fair. He was invisible yet unavoidable. He ruled the underworld with authority, but not cruelty. He enforced the laws of death, yet preserved balance. He was feared, respected, and quietly powerful. He was the god of endings, of boundaries, of inevitability. To understand Hades, one must move slowly, linger on each myth, repeat each detail, and contemplate the lessons embedded in his actions. In doing so, one sees that Hades, like all the Olympians, is not merely a figure of awe, but a reflection of human understanding, of life, death, order, patience, and the unyielding passage of time. And so Hades remains quietly and inexorably the god of the underworld, a figure of calm power, patient authority, and inevitable justice, whose stories, when told slowly, revealed the depth, complexity, and strangely human character of the king of the dead.
Demeter and Hestia, what they were really like. Demeter, Hestia, two goddesses of Olympus, often overlooked in casual retellings, yet central to the slow, deliberate functioning of the world the Greeks inhabited. To understand them fully, one must take the time to linger on each story, each detail, each repetition, as we have done with Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, and Hades. For both of these goddesses, the essence of their power lies not in dramatic exploits or divine quarrels, but in persistence, care, and the maintenance of order. Let us begin with Demeter, goddess of agriculture, fertility, and the cycles of life. She is the daughter of Cronus and Rhea, sister of Zeus, Hera, Hestia, Hades, and Poseidon. Swallowed at birth, regurgitated, she shares with her siblings a history marked by struggle and survival. But unlike her brothers, whose stories often emphasize power and conquest, Demeter's story emphasizes sustenance, nurture, and the slow rhythms of life itself. Demeter is primarily concerned with the growth of crops, the fertility of the earth, and the well-being of humankind. In myth, she is responsible for the cycles of planting and harvest, ensuring that the earth produces sustenance for mortals. Her care is meticulous, and her attention to detail is evident in countless stories. To the Greeks, she represents the natural order, the slow and steady rhythm of the seasons, and the fundamental need for humans to respect the land that sustains them. One of the most famous stories involving Demeter is that of her daughter Persephone and the abduction by Hades. Here we must linger, slowly, on the details. Persephone is picking flowers in a meadow when Hades rises from the earth and takes her to the underworld. Demeter's grief is profound. She wanders the earth in sorrow, neglecting her duties, causing famine and desolation wherever she goes. The earth becomes barren, crops fail, mortals suffer. Slowly, the story emphasizes the deep bond between mother and child, the necessity of the earth's fertility, and the power of grief and longing. Finally, a compromise is reached. Persephone will spend part of the year with Hades and part with Demeter. This cyclical arrangement explains the seasons. When Persephone descends to the underworld, the earth grows cold and barren. When she returns, the land becomes fertile and abundant again. In this story, repeated countless times in art, ritual, and literature, we see Demeter's nature, persistent, attentive, protective, and deeply connected to the rhythms of life. Demeter's symbols reinforce these traits. She is often depicted with sheaves of wheat, corn, or barley. She carries a torch, symbolizing her search for her daughter, and sometimes a scepter, representing her authority over agriculture and fertility. Slowly considering these symbols, one appreciates that Demeter's power is not dramatic in the way of storms or earthquakes, but enduring, consistent, and vital to human survival. Her festivals, such as the Eleusinian mysteries, further emphasize her role. For generations, mortals gathered to honor her, seeking knowledge, blessings, and connection to the cycles of life and death. These ceremonies, shrouded in secrecy, reflect the slow, patient influence of Demeter, whose presence shapes the fundamental experiences of human existence. Now let us turn to Hestia, goddess of the hearth, home, and domestic order. Hestia is the eldest daughter of Cronus and Rhea, swallowed by her father, regurgitated, and present from the very beginning of the world of gods and men. Unlike her siblings, Hestia rarely intervenes in dramatic myths or heroic exploits. Her influence is quiet, steady, and persistent. She embodies the stability of the home, the sacredness of fire, and the importance of family and domestic harmony. Hestia's hearth is central to Greek homes and city-states alike. Every home maintained a sacred fire dedicated to Hestia, and the hearth of the city itself, often in the Prytaneum or central gathering place, was never allowed to go out. This continuity, repeated day after day, year after year, reflects Hestia's nature, patient, enduring, and protective of the rhythms of domestic life. She is the goddess of beginnings, of continuity, of safety and order. Hestia's character is unique among the Olympians. She never marries, never engages in quarrels, never takes sides in divine conflicts. She relinquished her position on Olympus voluntarily when Dionysus was admitted among the gods, demonstrating her preference for peace and stability over power or fame. Slowly, if we consider this act, we see that Hestia's strength lies in restraint, in consistency, in the preservation of what is vital but often unnoticed. Both Demeter and Hestia, then, exemplify aspects of divinity that are quiet, enduring, and deeply human. Demeter manifests through the cycles of the earth, the growth of crops, and the care of her child. Hestia manifests through the hearth, the home, and the continuity of life. Neither seeks dramatic glory, yet both are essential to the functioning of the world, both divine and mortal. Their power is subtle, pervasive, and persistent, much like the slow, steady storytelling we are engaged in now. It is also worth noting, slowly and deliberately, the contrasts between these two goddesses. Demeter's power is outward, affecting the land, the seasons, and mortal survival. Hestia's power is inward, maintaining the stability of homes and cities. Demeter acts with intensity and emotion, her grief shaping the world itself. Hestia acts with calm, patience, and quiet authority, ensuring continuity. Both are necessary, and together they represent the complementary aspects of care, sustenance, and order. In mythology, both are revered and respected, though their recognition differs. Demeter's influence is celebrated in large-scale festivals and stories of agricultural importance, whereas Hestia's influence is embedded in the daily life of every household. Slowly, if we consider this, we see that the divine need not always be loud or dramatic to be essential. Persistence, patience, and attentiveness can be as powerful as thunderbolts or tridents. Finally, we return to the notion of repetition. The stories of Demeter and Hestia are told and retold year after year, generation after generation. The cycles of planting, harvest, grief, reconciliation, and domestic care are repeated endlessly, not only in myth, but in practice, in ritual, and in human life. And it is this repetition, this slow unfolding, that allows us to understand them, that their power is not immediate, not flashy, but enduring, consistent, and deeply meaningful. In conclusion,
Demeter and Hestia are central to the slow, deliberate order of the world. Demeter, through agriculture and the cycles of life and death, teaches us about care, persistence, and the consequences of grief and loss. Hestia, through the hearth and home, teaches us about stability, continuity, and the quiet, essential power of domestic order. Both are profoundly human in their traits, yet divine in their reach. Both are essential to understanding the Olympian world, and both, when considered slowly and repetitively, reveal the deep, patient, and enduring nature of Greek mythology itself.
The remaining Olympians, what they were really like. By now we have considered Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Hades, Demeter, and Hestia. Slowly, patiently, we have explored their domains, personalities, and contradictions. Now we turn to the remaining Olympians: Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Hermes, and Dionysus. Each of these gods and goddesses has their own particular influence, their own stories, and their own quirks. And as always, we will take our time, lingering on each detail, repeating, emphasizing until the full, slow, sleepy panorama of Greek mythology emerges. Let us begin with Athena, goddess of wisdom, war strategy, and craft. Athena, born fully grown and armored from the head of Zeus, is often celebrated for her intelligence and calm strategic thinking. Unlike Ares, she does not rush into battle impulsively. She calculates, observes, and plans. She is associated with weaving, pottery, and other crafts, reflecting her connection to human skill and ingenuity. Athena's symbols, the owl, representing wisdom, and the olive tree, representing peace and prosperity, emphasize her dual nature, both a protector and a strategist. Slowly considering her myths, one notes her guidance of heroes like Odysseus, her impartiality in warfare, and her often understated yet decisive influence. She is calm, observant, and relentlessly intelligent. Next is Apollo, god of the sun, music, prophecy, and medicine. Apollo embodies harmony, order, and artistic skill. He carries the lyre, a symbol of his musical mastery, and the laurel, a symbol of victory and prophecy. He is a god of pattern and rhythm, both in the natural world and in human life. Apollo's oracles, particularly at Delphi, demonstrate his influence over knowledge, insight, and foresight. Slowly, if we reflect on his character, we see a god of discipline, of refinement, and of structured influence. His light illuminates truth, yet his wrath can be as precise as it is punishing. Artemis, twin sister of Apollo, is goddess of the hunt, wilderness, and childbirth. She is fiercely independent, often associated with virginal purity, and protects young women and children. Her bow and arrows symbolize precision, swiftness, and lethal skill. Artemis's myths are full of pursuit, protection, and vengeance. Like Apollo, she embodies order in the natural world, but in the untamed spaces, forests, mountains, and remote wilderness. Slowly, we notice her dual nature, nurturing protector and relentless avenger. She teaches that independence, vigilance, and careful attention are virtues, though they may manifest as severity. Ares, god of war, presents a stark contrast to Athena. Impulsive, aggressive, and passionate, Ares embodies the chaotic, violent, and often destructive aspects of warfare. He delights in the frenzy of battle rather than strategy. His symbols, the spear, helmet, and dogs of war, emphasize aggression and conflict. Slowly considering his role,
One sees him as necessary yet unpredictable, embodying human passion, rage, and the darker instincts of conflict. Ares teaches the consequences of violence and the fleeting nature of glory, particularly when it is untempered by wisdom or foresight. Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, and desire, influences both gods and mortals alike. She embodies attraction, charm, and the power of emotion. Her symbols, the dove, rose, and myrtle, highlight beauty, sensuality, and the sway of passion. Aphrodite's stories are intertwined with both joy and trouble, for desire often leads to conflict, jealousy, and unforeseen consequences. Slowly, we note that she is neither entirely benevolent nor malevolent. She is the embodiment of human desire magnified to cosmic proportions. Love, attraction, and charm are her domain, yet they carry both pleasure and complication. Hephaestus, god of fire, craftsmanship, and metalworking, is the divine artisan. He creates weapons, armor, and magnificent objects for gods and mortals alike. Despite his physical imperfections, he is immensely skilled and patient. His forge is both literal and symbolic, a place of creation, transformation, and enduring labor. Slowly considering Hephaestus, we see the value of patience, diligence, and skill. He is a god of subtle influence, whose work is indispensable, yet often unnoticed or taken for granted. Hermes, messenger of the gods, god of trade, travelers, and cunning, is quick, clever, and versatile. He carries the caduceus, winged sandals, and a traveler's hat, symbols of communication, speed, and movement. Hermes bridges worlds between gods and mortals, life and death, commerce and trickery. Slowly observing his stories, one notes his pragmatism, adaptability, and ingenuity. He is indispensable for the functioning of the cosmos, connecting realms and facilitating both mischief and order. Finally, Dionysus, god of wine, revelry, and ecstasy, embodies freedom, transformation, and the loosening of social and natural constraints. He teaches both joy and danger. Intoxication can bring pleasure, insight, and release, but also chaos, destruction, and loss of control. Slowly considering Dionysus, we understand him as a god who balances order and disorder, pleasure and peril, teaching mortals to respect forces larger than themselves while enjoying life's abundance. Now, slowly reflecting on all of these Olympians together, patterns emerge. Each god or goddess represents aspects of human experience magnified and repeated in myth. Athena, Apollo, and Artemis emphasize wisdom, order, and structure. Ares represents chaos and aggression. Aphrodite represents desire and emotional complexity. Hephaestus teaches patience and diligence. Hermes emphasizes movement, adaptability, and communication. Dionysus demonstrates both liberation and the danger of excess. Slowly repeating these observations, we see that the Olympians collectively embody the full range of human traits, behaviors, and emotions. Furthermore, the interplay between these gods, their alliances, rivalries, and interventions, demonstrates complexity that is subtle and often repetitive. Athena and Ares contrast strategy and impulse. Apollo and Dionysus contrast order and ecstasy. Aphrodite intersects with all, sowing both harmony and conflict. Hermes moves among them, facilitating messages, trade, and occasional mischief. Slowly observing these dynamics, we see that the Olympians, like human societies, rely on balance, tension, and repetition. Finally, it is worth noting the symbols, rituals, and stories that anchor their influence. Temples, festivals, offerings, and myths all serve to reinforce the presence of these gods in human life. From the Olympic Games honoring Zeus to the Eleusinian mysteries for Demeter, from the Pythian Games for Apollo to Dionysian festivals of wine and theater, the Greeks maintained a slow, continuous relationship with the divine. Each ritual, repeated across generations, reflects the same patient, persistent influence of the gods themselves. In conclusion, the remaining Olympians, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Hermes, and Dionysus, complete the picture of the divine. They embody wisdom, strategy, art, independence, aggression, desire, craft, communication, and ecstasy. They are humanized yet divine, repetitive yet instructive, slow in their storytelling yet persistent in their influence. To understand them fully, one must linger, repeat, and observe their stories carefully, allowing the slow unfolding of myth to reveal its complexity, contradictions, and subtle lessons. Together with Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Hades, Demeter, and Hestia, reflections on the Olympians, what they were really like. Now, having carefully considered each of the Olympians individually, Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Hades, Demeter, Hestia, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Hermes, and Dionysus, we arrive at the slow, deliberate task of reflection. What does it mean really to understand these gods? How can we comprehend their behaviors, their personalities, their interactions, and the endless repetition of their stories? And above all, what does it mean to linger patiently on each detail until the vast panorama of Greek mythology unfolds before us like a slowly turning scroll? Let us begin with Zeus, king of the gods. He embodies authority, power, and decisiveness. His stories are long, often repetitive, and full of both wisdom and folly. Zeus is unpredictable in his desires, yet consistent in his authority. He is both a protector and a punisher, a ruler whose decisions shape the fates of gods and mortals alike. Slowly recalling his myths, we see the repetition of his desires, the consequences of his decisions, and the human-like traits magnified in divine form. Hera, his queen, embodies patience, vigilance, and persistence. She is jealous, yes, but also protective, deliberate, and commanding. Her wrath is focused, her memory long, and her authority enduring. Slowly reviewing her actions, one notes that she is both punished and punisher, mother and avenger, ruler of marriage and guardian of order. Her stories unfold in patterns that are slow, repeated, and infinitely detailed, much like the cycles of human emotion itself. Poseidon represents the unpredictability of nature. The sea, the storms, the earthquakes, all reflect his temperament. He is generous, yet destructive, impulsive, yet commanding. Slowly tracing his actions across myths, one sees the duality of his power, the calm and the tempest, the creative and the destructive, the personal and the cosmic. Hades is patient, inevitable, and quietly powerful. He rules the underworld with calm authority, enforcing boundaries and ensuring the balance of life and death. Slowly considering Hades, we see that his influence is subtle but absolute, and that his realm, though shadowy, is as ordered as any other domain of Olympus. Demeter teaches us the rhythms of life and the cycles of nature. Through her grief over Persephone and her nurturing of the earth, she embodies care, persistence, and attention to detail. Hestia, in contrast, represents calm, domestic order, and continuity. Together, they exemplify patience, stability, and the quiet endurance that underpins both divine and human life. Among the remaining Olympians, Athena is strategy and wisdom. Apollo is harmony, order, and foresight. Artemis is vigilance, protection, and independence. Ares is chaos, aggression, and passion. Aphrodite is love, beauty, and desire. Hephaestus is skill, patience, and creation. Hermes is movement, adaptability, and cunning. Dionysus is ecstasy, transformation, and the delicate balance of pleasure and peril. Slowly tracing their stories, one observes a web of interactions, patterns of behavior, and repeated motifs that reflect human experience magnified in divine form. Now, if we pause, slowly, we can consider some patterns across all the Olympians. 1. The gods are humanized. They possess desires, emotions, weaknesses, and strengths that mirror those of mortals, only magnified and eternal. 2. Their influence is repeated. Stories recur, actions have consequences, and myths are retold across generations. 3. Their domains reflect aspects of life itself: power, love, wisdom, war, home, fertility, craft, commerce, and ecstasy. Slowly, one begins to appreciate the meticulous structure of the Greek pantheon, the deliberate repetition of their narratives, and the subtle lessons embedded within each myth. Furthermore, the relationships among the gods reveal patterns that are instructive, though tedious in their repetition. Zeus and Hera, authority and vigilance, desire and jealousy. Poseidon and Athena, chaos versus strategy. Apollo and Dionysus, order versus ecstasy. Aphrodite, intersecting with all, sowing both joy and conflict. Hermes, connecting realms, facilitating messages, and sometimes mischief. Slowly, the interplay demonstrates balance, tension, and interaction which, when observed patiently, becomes a profound meditation on order and human behavior. Let us also linger on the symbols and rituals. Each god has their emblem: Zeus's thunderbolt, Hera's peacock, Poseidon's trident, Hades' scepter, Demeter's wheat, Hestia's hearth, Athena's owl, Apollo's lyre, Artemis's bow, Ares's spear, Aphrodite's dove, Hephaestus's hammer, Hermes's caduceus, Dionysus's grapevine. Each symbol is repeated in stories, rituals, and art, slowly reinforcing the identity, domain, and personality of each deity. Observing these symbols is an exercise in attention, in patience, and in the appreciation of slow mythological narrative. Finally, let us reflect on the sheer duration and repetition of these myths. The Greeks told them over and over, generation after generation. Slowly, as we recount them, we find ourselves immersed in cycles. The cycles of the seasons, the cycles of human behavior, the cycles of divine action and reaction. Zeus acts, Hera reacts, Poseidon storms, Hades waits, Demeter grieves, Hestia maintains, and so on. Each repetition reinforces the character, the lesson, and the structure of the world the Greeks imagined. In conclusion, what are the Olympians really like? They are complex, repetitive, and humanized. They embody a full spectrum of human traits magnified to divine proportions. They are patient and impulsive, kind and cruel, strategic and chaotic, nurturing and destructive. Slowly, if one lingers on each story, each repetition, and each detail, the entire panorama of Greek mythology unfolds like a slowly deliberate meditation. The lessons are subtle, the contradictions are instructive, and the narrative, when prolonged and carefully considered, is profoundly, deliberately sleep-inducing. Thus, we reach the culmination of our slow journey through the Olympian gods. By repeating, reflecting, and lingering, we have painted a picture not of dramatic, high-action mythology, but of subtle, enduring, infinitely detailed divine humanism. Each god, each story, each repetition contributes to a vast, slow, and ultimately exhaustive exploration of what it means to be divine, and in turn, what it means to be human.
Final reflections. The Olympians and the slow wisdom of myth. And so, we arrive at the final part of our long, deliberate exploration of the Olympian gods. We have lingered on Zeus, the king of the gods, ruler of the sky and master of authority. We have considered Hera, the patient, vigilant queen, whose memory is long and whose presence is persistent. We have examined Poseidon, tempestuous lord of the sea and earthquakes, and Hades, calm, inevitable, ruler of the underworld. We have reflected on Demeter, guardian of the earth and life cycles, and Hestia, steady keeper of the hearth and domestic order. We have observed Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Hermes, and Dionysus, each embodying unique aspects of the human and natural world. And yet, despite all this, we must now pause slowly and consider what it all truly means. What is the purpose of these stories? Why do we retell them generation after generation? Why do we linger on repetition, on details, on patterns that seem to stretch endlessly? The answer, if we move slowly enough, is that these myths are mirrors. Mirrors of human nature, mirrors of the natural world, mirrors of time itself. Let us consider repetition first. In every story we have recounted, in every action of the gods, there is repetition. Zeus acts, Hera reacts. Poseidon storms, Athena plans. Demeter grieves, Persephone returns. The cycle repeats. Mortals experience the consequences, the seasons turn, life continues. Slowly, we begin to see that repetition is not redundancy, it is the very mechanism by which meaning is reinforced. Each repetition is a lesson in patience, observation, and reflection. Each repetition reminds us of the nature of life, of divinity, and of the inevitability of consequence. Next, we reflect on contradiction. The Olympians are contradictory. Zeus is wise and impulsive. Poseidon is generous and destructive. Hades is stern and fair. Aphrodite brings joy and conflict. Dionysus brings pleasure and peril. Slowly, we see that contradiction is not a flaw, it is a feature. It is through contradiction that the gods mirror human complexity. It is through contradiction that the myths remain endlessly interpretable, endlessly fascinating. Or, in our case, endlessly boring if we slow down enough. Consider also domain. Each god and goddess governs a specific domain: the sky, the sea, the underworld, the earth, the hearth, wisdom, art, war, love, craft, commerce, and ecstasy. These domains overlap, intersect, and sometimes conflict. Zeus rules the sky, but Poseidon can challenge the mortal world through storms. Demeter governs agriculture, but Hades influences the life cycle through death. Slowly, observing these intersections, we realize that the divine world is not linear, not simple, but an intricate web. And in this web, each story, repeated and lingered upon, reinforces the interconnectedness of life, human experience, and divine influence. Now, let us meditate slowly on human traits reflected in the gods: ambition, jealousy, desire, wisdom, patience, impulsivity, creativity, rage, love, vigilance, cleverness, and indulgence, all magnified in eternal divine forms. Slowly, repeating, reflecting, we see ourselves mirrored in Olympus. Each tale, each myth, each interaction is a mirror held up to human behavior, magnified and made eternal. And in the magnification, in the endless repetition of divine drama, we find the slow, patient lessons of life. Symbols, too, deserve reflection. The thunderbolt of Zeus, the peacock of Hera, the trident of Poseidon, the owl of Athena, the lyre of Apollo, the bow of Artemis, the spear of Ares, the dove of Aphrodite, the hammer of Hephaestus, the caduceus of Hermes, the grapevine of Dionysus, the wheat of Demeter, the hearth of Hestia, the scepter of Hades. All these symbols recur endlessly in art, in ritual, in story. Slowly, they reinforce memory, association, and meaning. They are visual repetitions of the narratives, quietly embedding lessons in our minds without urgency, without hurry. And finally, let us linger slowly on the notion of time. The myths stretch across generations. They move through cycles of birth, struggle, desire, conflict, resolution, and repetition. They echo in human life, in the changing seasons, in the patterns of behavior, in the cycles of love, war, creation, and death. Slowly, if we dwell long enough, the Olympians become not characters alone, but patterns, frameworks, and eternal mirrors of life's rhythms. And so we conclude, not with dramatic resolution, not with sudden insight, but with the slow, deliberate understanding that the Olympians, in all their contradictions, domains, and repetitions, are reflections of the world itself. They are slow-moving, patient, endlessly repeating stories that teach us, over generations, over time, over contemplation, the subtle and persistent nature of life, human behavior, and the universe. Slowly we repeat: Zeus acts, Hera reacts, Poseidon storms, Athena plans, Demeter grieves, Persephone returns, Hades waits, Dionysus celebrates, Aphrodite desires, Hephaestus creates, Hermes moves, Artemis protects, Apollo illuminates, Ares fights, and Hestia maintains. Repeating, the patterns emerge. Slowly, as we linger, the panorama unfolds. Slowly the lessons seep in. Slowly one can fall asleep to the endless, patient rhythm of myth. And that, finally, is the essence of Greek mythology. Not drama, not excitement, not spectacle, but repetition. Patience, observation, reflection, contradiction, balance, interconnection, and endless, slow, sleep-inducing detail. Thus ends our long, slow, deliberate journey through the Olympian gods, their personalities, domains, stories, contradictions, and patterns. Slowly, we have seen the mirror of humanity magnified into eternity. Slowly, we have repeated, lingered, reflected. Slowly, if we are patient, the Olympians teach us their lessons, not in haste, not in spectacle, but in quiet, patient, endless repetition. Lesser-known myths, minor gods, and the endless details. Having already reflected on the major Olympians, their domains, personalities, contradictions, and patterns, we now turn to the minor gods, spirits, and demigods of Greek mythology. These figures are numerous, and their stories are often repetitive, contradictory, and slow-moving, perfect for the sleep-inducing style we are cultivating. Slowly, patiently, we will explore them. First, consider the Muses, the 9 daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne. They govern poetry, music, dance, and memory. Each muse has a particular domain. Calliope presides over epic poetry, Clio over history, Erato over love poetry, and so on. Slowly, we observe that the muses do not act dramatically themselves, rather they inspire others, guiding mortals and gods alike. Their influence is subtle, repetitive, and persistent, echoing in the storytelling, songs, and art of the Greeks. Repetition is central to their function. The muses remind us that inspiration is never sudden, but slow, cumulative, and patient. Next, we have the Graces, Charites, and Furies, Erinnyes, 2 sets of minor deities representing complementary aspects of life. The Graces symbolize beauty, charm, and goodwill. They are gentle, repetitive in their influence, encouraging harmony and social cohesion. The Furies, on contrast, pursue justice, vengeance, and the punishment of wrongs. Slowly, we note their persistence. They never tire, their pursuit is unending, and their presence reminds mortals that actions have consequences. Repetition, again, is a key motif. Consider also Eros, the god of love and desire. Often considered a minor god or primordial force, Eros influences both gods and mortals, sowing attraction, tension, and sometimes chaos. Slowly we trace his interventions. Desire strikes, choices are made, stories unfold, consequences repeat. Eros's influence is subtle yet pervasive, and his effect echo through countless myths, reinforcing the idea that love, like mythology itself, is cyclical and repetitive. We must also linger on demigods and heroes, such as Hercules, Perseus, and Theseus. These figures straddle the divine and mortal worlds. Hercules, son of Zeus, performs labors that are repetitive and meticulously detailed. Each labor is a story in itself, slow-moving and full of consequence. Perseus undertakes tasks involving divine assistance, cleverness, and repeated encounters with monsters. Theseus's adventures include repeated cycles of struggle, escape, and cleverness. Slowly, if we trace each pattern, we see that heroes serve as mirrors of the gods. They inherit divine traits, repeat motifs, and demonstrate the persistence of myth across time. Now, let us consider minor personifications, the spirits of concepts. Nike represents victory. Tyche embodies chance or fortune. Nemesis represents retribution. Slowly repeating these details, we observe that these personifications rarely act alone. Their influence is woven into other myths, subtly, repeatedly, reinforcing themes of balance, justice, and consequence. They are reminders that even minor figures have enduring roles, often unnoticed, yet persistent. Next, we reflect on rivers, mountains, and natural features personified as deities. The river gods, the nymphs of forests, springs, and groves all maintain slow, continuous influence over human and divine activity. Each nymph, each river god, each sacred tree or spring is associated with a minor tale, a repetitive story, or a ritual. Slowly, repeating these details, we see that the natural world itself is imbued with divine order, persistent patterns, and continuous observation, much like our slow recounting of these myths. We must also consider transformations, a theme ubiquitous in Greek mythology. Gods, mortals, and animals change forms repeatedly. Daphne becomes a laurel tree, Arachne becomes a spider. Io becomes a cow. Slowly reflecting on these transformations, we see the repeated lesson. Change is constant, consequence is inevitable, and the divine hand shapes mortal and natural worlds alike. Each repetition reinforces patience, observation, and attentiveness, the same qualities we exercise in listening to or reading this very long, boring recounting. Finally, we reflect on rituals and festivals associated with these minor gods and personifications. Each festival, each offering, each repeated story is a reinforcement of continuity. Slowly considering them, we note that repetition, endurance, and observation are central. From the Pythian games for Apollo, to the Panathenaic festival for Athena, to smaller local rituals for nymphs, river gods, or the Muses, the Greek religious imagination thrived on cycles, repeated actions, and persistent observance. Thus ends Part 9, a meditation on the slower, subtler, and minor aspects of mythology designed to add length, reflection, and sleep-inducing repetition to our ongoing journey through Greek myth.
Ultimate recap and endless reflection. And now, having traversed the stories of the major Olympians, the minor gods, the Muses, the Graces, the Furies, the demigods, and the subtle spirits of nature, we arrive at the final, slowest, most deliberate part of our journey. This is the ultimate recap, the slow repetition, the endless loops that stretch time and allow the mind to settle into the patterns of myth. Slowly, we will repeat, reflect, and linger. Let us begin once more with Zeus, king of the gods. Recall his thunderbolt, his authority, his impulsive desires, his measured judgments, and his interventions in human and divine affairs. Slowly, remember his contradictions: wisdom paired with rashness, authority paired with human-like folly. Repeat these observations, linger on them, and allow them to settle into memory. Hera, queen of the gods, follows. Slowly consider her vigilance, her patience, her jealousy, and her protective nature over marriage. Think again of her interventions, her plots, her punishments, and her subtle influence over both gods and mortals. Repeat, reflect, and let the repetition itself become part of the narrative rhythm. Poseidon, tempestuous, unpredictable, yet consistent in his command over the sea, storms, and earthquakes. Slowly recall his duality, generosity, and destruction, calm and chaos. His trident strikes, his waves crash, and yet his influence is continuous and inevitable. Repeat this slowly. Hades, calm and inevitable, rules the underworld. Consider his scepter, his invisibility, his fairness, and the slow, deliberate administration of death and balance. Slowly reflect on his patience and quiet authority. Repeat. Demeter, grieving mother and nurturer of the earth, brings fertility, crops, and cycles of life and death. Slowly remember her persistence, her grief over Persephone, her influence on the seasons, and her connection to human sustenance. Repeat. Hestia, calm and domestic, maintains the hearth, the home, and the continuity of life. Slowly recall her quiet power, her patience, and the enduring presence of the hearth fire. Repeat. Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategy, guides heroes, plans battles, and embodies intelligence and craft. Slowly reflect on her calm, measured influence. Repeat. Apollo, god of sun, music, prophecy, and order, illuminates, inspires, and demonstrates discipline and foresight. Slowly remember his repeated patterns, his duality of light and wrath. Repeat. Artemis, vigilant protector of wilderness, women, and children, embodies independence and precision. Slowly recall her duality of nurturing and vengeance. Repeat. Ares, impulsive and aggressive god of war, embodies chaos, passion, and conflict. Slowly consider his lessons about violence, fleeting glory, and human instinct. Repeat. Aphrodite, goddess of love and desire, brings beauty, attraction, and emotional complexity. Slowly remember her influence on gods and mortals, both harmonious and conflict-inducing. Repeat. Hephaestus, god of craft and fire, demonstrates patience, skill, and creativity. Slowly reflect on his quiet, enduring influence through creation. Repeat. Hermes, messenger and trickster, facilitates movement, communication, and ingenuity. Slowly consider his versatility, subtlety, and connection between realms. Repeat. Dionysus, god of wine, revelry, and transformation, embodies ecstasy, pleasure, and the delicate balance of order and chaos. Slowly recall his lessons on indulgence and liberation. Repeat. Now extend the reflection to the minor gods, the muses, the graces, the furies, Eros, and spirits of rivers, mountains, and groves. Slowly consider their persistent influence, their subtle power, and their endless repetition across myths. Repeat. And finally, the demigods and heroes, Hercules, Perseus, Theseus, and others. Slowly recall their labors, adventures, transformations, and repeated encounters with the divine. Repeat. Now repeat the patterns themselves. Zeus acts, Hera reacts, Poseidon storms, Athena plans, Demeter grieves, Persephone returns, Hades waits, Dionysus celebrates, Aphrodite desires, Hephaestus creates, Hermes moves, Artemis protects, Apollo illuminates, Ares fights, Hestia maintains. Slowly, endlessly, Allow these patterns to settle, repeat, and echo in the mind. And so, slowly, we conclude, not with drama, not with resolution, but with reflection, repetition, and meditation. The Olympians, in their contradictions, domains, and cycles, teach us patience, observation, endurance, and the subtle lessons of life itself. Slowly, if we linger, repeat, and reflect, we see the patterns, we see the cycles, we see the mirror of humanity and the eternal nature of myth. And so, dear listener, let your mind rest. Repeat these stories, these names, these actions. Let them unfold slowly, deliberately, endlessly, until the rhythms of myth become the rhythms of sleep. Slowly, Zeus acts. Slowly, Hera reacts. Slowly, Poseidon storms. Slowly, Athena plans. Slowly, repeat, reflect, and drift, as the Olympians themselves watch silently, patiently, and eternally. Eternal cycles, cosmic boredom, and infinite sleep. We have told the stories. We have repeated the patterns. We have reflected on the contradictions. We have lingered on the symbols. And still the myths remain. For mythology, like time, does not end. It cycles. It circles. It loops. Zeus will always raise his thunderbolt. Hera will always watch, jealous and protective. Poseidon will always stir the waves, crashing endlessly upon the shore. Hades will always wait, patient, unchanging, beneath the earth. Demeter will always grieve. Persephone will always descend, and spring will always return. Hestia's fire will never die. Athena will always plan. Apollo will always illuminate. Artemis will always guard. Ares will always rage. Aphrodite will always enchant. Hephaestus will always strike his hammer. Hermes will always carry his messages. Dionysus will always dance. Hestia will always maintain, again and again.